chapter 1154, and I feel like I was kind of expecting what we got in this chapter in terms of the appearance of a specific character, but at the same time I also wasn't expecting this at all, and at this point I sound like a broken record since I keep saying I don't want to sound like a broken record, because so far this backstory has been everything I've wanted it to be. On a side note, Anime Expo just passed where there was a ton of news, Frieren, ReZero, Mushoku Tensei, Bleach all returning for new seasons, but the biggest of them all, in my opinion, is the return of the Black Clover anime. I always believed, I knew it would be back eventually, so it's just a lot of great stuff for us, and we can top off all of that greatness, goodness, with this chapter of One Piece. Kicking off with the cover story, Ocho the Yakuza boss of Ringo leads Yamato, Ulti and page 1 to someone's grave, a hero who was from the West Blue but raised in Ringo. I was almost certain the first thing that was going to happen in this region was to visit and pay respects to Izo and Ashura's shrine, but instead it sounds like this is going to be a very nice chunk of lore, the stuff that everyone's been waiting very impatiently for with this cover story. But as for who this person is, I think it's going to be someone new, since the first thing I did was go over to the wiki where I went through the list of characters from the West Blue, but none of them seem to fit the description of being raised in Ringo. There's also the detail that they're dead, but to be called a hero in Wano, surely this person must have achieved something great, because Wano's other heroes are Ryuma, the god of the blade, and more recently Luffy, although the majority of the country only knows him as Joyboy. The grave is in ruins as well, so it looks like this is someone that maybe the general public, the average citizen of Wano, doesn't know about. This person's been slowly forgotten over time. The only thing I can theorize is what if this hero has some connection to what's going on in the Elbaf arc right now, the same way that the Vegapunk stuff in the Germa cover story was obviously directly connected to the ongoing Egghead arc. The story and cover story going directly hand in hand, and with that I have two ideas, and it links to some stuff we learn in this chapter, so I'll hold off from saying it for now until we get to that point in the chapter. And back to the backstory, we continue after the Big Mom incident, which took place right after Loki was born. It also makes sense now why we didn't see Harald during that time back in Big Mom's flashback, and it's because he wasn't on the island at the time. But the curse of Loki is causing chaos, country getting hit by every kind of calamity, huge fires, storms, famine. You have to question if there was an actual reason as to why all this terrible stuff happened after Loki was born, or if it was just down to him having the worst luck ever. It was pretty much confirmation bias on the Giant's part, confirmation bias being when you subconsciously look for stuff, information that supports your pre-existing ideas, opinions. They already had Loki's curse planted in their minds, that idea, so the simple reasoning, the easy answer was to attribute all of this misfortune to Loki. And baby Loki does manage to make his way back to the castle, and all he wanted was to receive his mother's love. Like any other baby, he just wanted to be held by his mother, to hug her. He even breaks down the door. He doesn't know his own strength. He's a newborn, he doesn't know anything, but the one thing he should know is his mother's warmth. Yet Astrid completely shuts him out, rejects him, and she has completely lost it by this point, basically saying Loki will cause the collapse of the entire nation. But to be fair, on that point she could be right, since Loki himself said pretty much the same thing when he was introduced. So did Loki get that idea of himself destroying Elbaph from his own mother's ramblings, which evidently caught on with the rest of the country? Did he embrace that, or is it something he decided on his own, maybe because of a different factor? Also, the god stopping him from seeing his mother, it does hurt to read this, you know, he doesn't know any better, it's his mother. What do you expect from a baby? One thing every baby should have is the care and protection of their mother, yet his own has already pushed him out of her life. We also see some giants getting really worked up, really desperate. It almost caused a giant civil war, and we see the first seeds of the idea of Loki's curse starting to take root, and they went to attack Hyruden and Ida because of their relation to Loki. Hyruden, his brother, and Ida being Hyruden's mother by proxy, got pulled into this as well. Desperation is really messing with these giants' minds, because by this logic, would they have gone after Harald himself as Loki's father? Would they have had the balls to attack their great warrior, former warrior king, the same way they try to attack a defenseless mother and son. Regardless, Harald does return just in time to protect his family, his first family, and he brings with him foreign aid to help out the country. So I will say well done to him for that, for being able to actually get another nation to cooperate on this scale, this level, that they would support a nation that was so scary, so intimidating to them in the not so distant past. His diplomacy alone was able to get the country out of this extreme low point. And it's not just one nation, we see so many ships arriving on the shores of Elbaph with literal boatloads of food, and what makes this even more of an effort is that it's not regular people that they are coming to the aid of, it's giants, so that aid would need to be amplified tenfold. Unfortunately, or fortunately some might say, Estrid had passed away before Harald returned, and with how much time he did spend out at sea, I don't think he ever did get to know Estrid's darker side, like beyond the gold digging, the side of her that compelled her to do what she did to Loki. And given how much he was all about peace and diplomacy at that point in time, I would say he seemed like the kind of guy who would overlook a lot of stuff. He'd try his best to focus on the positives. For the sake of peace, maintaining the marriage, keeping her happy, he prioritized all of that. He prioritized Elbaph over his own happiness. We see him picking up baby Loki, and I think he did try to be a good father, but with how much he was traveling across the world trying to build relations with other nations, changing the country, although he did try, I don't think he was the best father he could have been. And we see the soldiers lie about the blindfold to Harald, to their king, saying it was because of a disease, so Harald really was out of the loop here. Well, they didn't say disease, but you can clearly tell that they're twisting their words, they're using specific wording to make it sound worse than it is, because we know it's purely a visual thing with his eyes. They look different, but that's it. And I get the feeling Estrid put them up to this as well before she died. This was a real cover-up. Estrid literally took the truth with her to her grave. So does this mean that Harald was never able to look at his own son in his eyes? Meanwhile, Ida opened a bar in the underworld, which is really cool because that bar was technically our first introduction to present-day Elbaph, and with that, surely then in the present there must be a group of giants relaxing there right now who had no idea about anything going on in the Sun World until Emu's Haki Blast, which they definitely would have felt like the bartender Mato and everyone else in the bar must be losing their minds right now. And 256 years ago, Jarl brings up an incident that occurred at the reverie where Harald attended, sort of. He snuck in as a soldier to a friend of his who was a king. Now whoever this king is, sneaking Harald into the reverie, now that's a real friend. If he was discovered, that could have been very, very bad news. From the world government's perspective, I feel like that's giving them the perfect excuse to lob off your head. You're not supposed to be there, you're unaffiliated, you're a massive security threat, and he would have been arrested if not for a murder that drew everyone's attention, and we learn about the details of that incident later on. Continuing this talk, Jarl brings up another very interesting topic regarding a group of giant and ancient giant shipbuilders with around 100 members according to Jarl, who sail the seas, and one day they sent a letter home saying they had been captured, presumably by the world government, because who else would do this? And the collective name for these giant shipbuilders is the Great Hammer Warband or Battalion, which first of all is a great name, and second of all in Japanese is pronounced Kalela or Karela, because R's and L's in Japanese sound similar. I've seen so many different versions of this name, Galera, Karela, Kalela. The point is that it sounds extremely similar to Galela, the famous shipbuilding company of Water 7, and the names are definitely similar enough to theorize about, because back to last chapter, Harald was sharing the greater knowledge of Elbaph's sailing and navigation to other nations, other islands. One of those islands could very well be Water 7, and that brings in the topic of the ancient weapon Pluton. What if it was this group of giants who originally made it and at some point passed down the blueprints to a group of shipbuilders on Water 7, which is why they were in Tom's possession. There's also this extract from chapter 355 where Tom called it the most dangerous beast in shipbuilding history, and Frankie questioned how humans could even build it. Well, that's because it wasn't built by humans but by giants. And now back to the cover story for the first of the two ideas, because we know Pluton at this moment is laying dormant beneath Mount Fuji in Wano. So talking about this hero whose grave Yamato is now visiting, and how the cover story may be linked to what's going on in the Elbaph arc, Pluton could be that link. What if this hero had something to do with Pluton eventually ending up in Wano, presumably after after the Void Century War, and by extension something to do with the walls around the country as well, since they would have been erected after Pluton was placed there. So this hero was a vital figure in preserving Wano and Pluton for the future after that war. I might be jumping the gun because this is a lot of stuff, a lot of important stuff to be crediting to this one guy, but that's what I'm going with for now. We may find out in next week's cover story who he is, where I will most likely be proven horribly wrong. Back to these shipbuilding giants though, the thing is that Harald thought they were a myth, so these guys are ancient, no pun intended, assumedly Void Century ancient, and it's stated by Jarl that a great enemy must have existed to have been able to capture them all, and that enemy would be Emu, the Elders, the 20 Kingdom Alliance, and whoever else was on that side. There was also a rumor of a frozen army of giants, which may or may not be related to these shipbuilders. So now going back in time, real time, nearly 500 chapters and over 13 years to chapter 660, where we saw these giant frozen figures on Punk Hazard. Is this what remains of the giant shipbuilders? They're all kinds of shapes and sizes. These two look like they are comfortably ancient giant sized, and you could say there's some resemblance between these silhouettes and some of these frozen giants. So in this case it would mean they were captured by the government. Could this have been the beginning of the government's obsession with trying to replicate the giant size and strength they've been trying since the Void Century? Moving on, while Harald's focus is firmly on rebuilding the country, Loki has found himself in the care, heavy quotation marks around care, of Estrid's brother, who was not caring at all. He was abusing him. We know Estrid's death was blamed on Loki, but that's no reason to treat him like this, as if he wasn't hurled off of the tree into the underworld. And since Harald wasn't home, and since Loki climbing back up the tree was reported directly to Estrid, I do think she was able to successfully cover up that whole incident like we saw her trying to do. Although it appears that this guy, Loki's uncle technically, although he was no real family to Loki, was killed by the beasts of the underworld, and we do know Loki befriended those beasts as a kid. Did he set this up for the beasts to kill his uncle, or did the beasts do it on their own? Did they do it freely for Loki's sake? Either or, they were more than just pets. When Loki called them his friends, he really meant it, and I can see a little smirk from Loki here, so in either case as well, he was definitely happy to be free of his uncle then to 48 years ago. And we do see more of Hyrudin being shamed for being illegitimate, so that I feel will come to a head eventually, either in this backstory or in the present. Loki is 15, 5 in human years, and he unleashes some of the giant beasts from the underworld onto the villages. This is another thing we already saw a bit of back in chapter 1136, and with the horrible life he's lived so far, it's kind of understandable that he would eventually pull something like this. Like I've said before, playing the role of the villain that was placed on him before he was even born, he's been treated with nothing but abuse and disdain up to this point. How did the giants think he would reciprocate that with hugs and kisses? No, he was always going to, whether he knew what he was doing or not. Since he was still a kid, he was always going to return that pain back to them. Although this whole ordeal also ended up giving him a whole new source of pain, because while this is going down, the two brothers had a confrontation which ended with Loki standing tall on his own while Hyrudin was knelt down but surrounded by his friends, and that really puts into perspective how alone Loki truly is. And he jumped straight off the tree in an effort to kill himself, just like a certain king of the beast's strongest creature, Kaido, and just like him, Loki could not die. He was driven to the point of wanting to end his own life. Why do we have to do this? It hurts. This is the second backstory in a row now where kids don't see the point in living. With Kuma, it was because he was losing everything. With Loki, it's because he never had anything to begin with. On a lighter note though, speaking of Kaido, there's just so many indicators, similarities that would point to him being Harald's son, and therefore Loki's and Hyrudin's brother. But by this point in time, Kaido is 11 years old, so I will submit I don't think Kaido is the son of Harald. Especially given how much of a genuinely good person Harald is, I don't think he would have done the deed out of wedlock behind Estrid's back. He was in tears at her funeral, so even though their marriage was arranged, and again Harald doesn't have the whole picture regarding Estrid, he did wholeheartedly care for her. And last but definitely not least, the main event for this chapter, the Rocks pirates have arrived in the underworld, where a mountain has been cut in half and where they meet little Loki. While they're not the Rocks pirates just yet, but with Rocks himself is also Stussy, is Whitebeard, and most notably to me is the Golden Lion Shiki. So we're getting more canon Shiki content We don't know if there are others maybe waiting back on the ship or wherever, but if not, I guess these 3 would be Rox's first crewmates, kind of like his version of the East Blue crew. Kaido will join them in 4 years time, and Big Mom, who would be 20 I think, 48 years ago, so Rox was very much building his crew at this point. Shiki says he has the face of a devil, and Whitebeard even notes how he's big even for a giant, so even though it's for a couple different reasons, it's kind of cool to see Loki catching the eyes of pirates of this caliber. Now for the second idea regarding the mystery cover story hero. Shiki's clothing, not just here but in general, aligns pretty much perfectly with Wano's aesthetic. First off, if this is Shiki, that would mean he is dead, which in my opinion would be the best course of action to take to deal with his character, because if he was alive, I feel like there would need to be massive leaps in logic in the canon story to make that work. Was he ever to show up again? And if he didn't show up, then what would be the point in keeping him alive in the first place? So as for his connection to Wano outside of the outfits, I don't know, but he does have a connection to Elbaf beyond showing up here, that being the beasts from the Strong World movie that in canon live on Elbaf in the underworld. You know what, here's an idea. It's a very shallow theory, but you know how Shiki visited Whitebeard after he broke out of Impel Down to tell him about his plan, and Whitebeard wasn't interested, told him to shut up? What if Shiki tried the same thing with Kaido in Wano, and given Kaido's temperament, the two of them had a run-in, and the people of Wano, not knowing any better, saw Shiki standing against Kaido and called him a hero for it, although in this scenario he did get defeated and killed. The whole detail about this hero being raised in Ringo as well, that could still work, because we now know he was on Elbaf with Rox 48 years ago, meaning he would have left Wano far before Kaido ever stepped foot in Wano. So we have that Pluton idea from earlier and the Shiki idea now for this mystery hero's identity. And finally, after nearly 200 chapters, the reveal of Rox D. Xebec's face. He has two-toned hair, a full set of teeth, a tattoo across his eye, a big build similar to Blackbeard but a bit thinner, keep that in mind, and the chapter ends with the narrator. That's 3 chapters in a row that have ended with the narrator. That's how you know we've been getting some big, huge revelations. Harald met Rox at the Reverie 8 years ago, so 56 years ago from the present. Rox D. Xebec was at the Reverie. In what capacity though? Was he representing a member nation? Was he part of the security for one of those nations? Did he show up on his own accord just as Harald did? And if so, what was his goal? In my mind right now, this would be before he decided that he wanted to be king of the entire world, but I think it was also here at this Reverie where he learned some very important information that would set him on that path. For example, the existence of Emu maybe, because I am very sure that by the time the God Valley incident came around, he was aware of Emu, so maybe this is where he learned about them. In any case, the incident that took place there was that this man killed a Navy admiral, and that's how he became a wanted man. Rox was in fact 100% in every aspect that guy that he has been built up to be. So we can put to bed the idea of him being a joke character like Buggy. He killed them at the Reverie as well. That's right in the heart of enemy territory, and he still got away after doing it. Of course, we don't know the details of how this went down, but the way it's being framed here, it just feels to me that Rox did this overwhelmingly, as in it wasn't that close of a fight. Think Roger's big appearance in Oden's backstory. For all we know, this guy could be an admiral as well. It's also interesting to think about who the former admirals were before the ones we've come to know in the present. What devil fruit powers did they have? Was Kong an admiral during this time? You would assume so, before he became fleet admiral, then commander-in-chief. Although I think it's safe to say Rox would have killed them all the same if it was any of them he ran into instead of this one unlucky admiral, which he did. And they ask Loki if this is Elbaf as well as if Harald is around, although he's only looking for yes as the answer to both of his questions. And the last line of the chapter, he is the future captain of the Rox pirates and father of Blackbeard. So from this point in the flashback, in another 8 years time, Marshall D. Teach will be born to Rox, and his mother, whose maiden name we know was Marshall. I'm guessing she had the Will of D as well, the same way that Ace inherited his own mother's name and she had the Will of D, Podcast D. Rouge. I think it's the same here with Blackbeard's mother. She was Marshall D. someone. And speaking of Ace, that means the battle between the two of them was between the son of Rox and the son of Roger, making it a literal generational battle carrying on from their fathers. And on top of that, the two of of them ended up on Whitebeard's crew, and I am sure that he knew about Blackbeard's lineage and that he could not care less about it. Remember his words, "It doesn't matter who your father is, we are all children of the sea." That's what he told Ace when he revealed Roger was his father. And then what he told Squad about Ace, "It's wrong to condemn a child for the sins of their father." That was Whitebeard's philosophy. Teach, being Rock's son, didn't matter at all to him, but it for sure matters a lot to me. So his flagship, the Saber of Xebec, is named after his father. I want to know how Blackbeard himself learned about all of this, because Rox did die, supposedly die, on God Valley only 2 years after he was born. Maybe he learned from his mother, maybe Whitebeard told him about Rox, maybe he just learned on his own. Either way, this is wild. I knew Rox was going to show up in this flashback because of that little bit we saw of Loki wanting to join his crew, and that he was looking for someone then as well. We now know that was Harald, but I wasn't expecting this much. I wasn't expecting a face reveal, I wasn't expecting the Blackbeard reveal, and now I have my fingers crossed that we don't have to wait another 200 plus chapters to see why Rox was looking for Harald, and we continue on directly from this point next chapter instead of skipping past it. And since he was building his crew around this time and that he's already met Harald, I think Rox was looking for Harald here to recruit him to join his crew. Imagine that, the Rox pirates plus Harald on top. But if this is in fact the reason, I think it's safe to say Harald rejects the offer. And speaking of, we all knew he was going to be a key part of this flashback himself, but he's ended up being so much more important than I could have predicted. Like, him sharing Elbaph's navigation skills with the world is really a massive detail. Like, where would the world of pirates and marines be if he never did that back then? He's important enough to have Rox seek him out personally. We also know he met with Shanks at Marijwa. You know how Kuma is a critical piece to the Straw Hats' journey with how much he helped them? Harald seems like a critical piece of the old generation. It seems like he had a hand in some massively important stuff. I wouldn't be shocked if Roger ended up making an appearance in this flashback as well. And I don't even need to hope anymore, I can already tell that the rest of this backstory is gonna be incredible.